Additionally, we will send out a link to the recording of today's webinar after we conclude today. So please feel free to share that link with others within your organization. Finally, a reminder that today's presentation is eligible for continuing education credit through Earmark. So I'll go over how to get your CE credit at the end of the presentation. My name is Taylor Gorel, and I am a Senior Registration Specialist. I work with nonprofits nationwide to keep them compliant with state charitable solicitation, registration, and reporting requirements. I have worked for many years in the nonprofit sector. Labyrinth and Harbor Compliance support nonprofits by providing comprehensive compliance solutions, including nationwide charitable registration and reporting. On your screen, you'll see a few of the many wonderful nonprofit organizations we've helped keep compliant. Let's begin by looking at the topics we will cover in today's webinar. Today, we'll discuss the following: state charitable registration requirements, online fundraising activities and how they trigger registration requirements, why fundraising compliance should be a priority, what it takes to register to fundraise and how much it costs, how to manage state fundraising registrations, and simplify the process. The presentation will be about 45 to 50 minutes, followed by a 5 to 10 minute question and answer period. Let's start by reviewing a few terms to ensure we're using shared language. At its simplest, compliance means respect and adherence to rules. Charitable registration compliance is respect for and adherence to the laws and regulations governing charitable solicitation registration. What is charitable solicitation? Charitable solicitation is fundraising, asking for funds for a charitable purpose. While the IRS is the regulator of nonprofit status, the states are the regulators of fundraising. 40 states and the District of Columbia have charitable registration requirements. Each state has its own unique regulations for fundraising activities. These states require charities to register with them before they begin soliciting within their borders. Why? To protect the generous public and legitimate charitable organizations and the reputation and special status of the nonprofit sector. Charitable registration and reporting regulations were written with these goals in mind. They are focused on regulating the solicitation of donations, not the receipt. I'm going to repeat that because it's very important. It is the act of soliciting donations, not the receipt of donations itself, that triggers the need to register. We'll discuss the difference in just a moment. This map shows the states that require charitable registration. It's a great resource, and you may want to bookmark it to use as a reference. The web address is labyrinthinc.com/state-map. The 41 states shaded in dark blue and orange require charities to register to solicit. The difference is that the states in dark blue require charities to register to solicit, and the states in orange require charities to register to solicit and also direct them to include charitable disclosure statements in solicitations and donor correspondence. The 2 states in light blue do not require charitable registration, but do require disclosure statements. Now, I'm going to take a moment here and launch a quick poll just to get a pulse on where people might be currently registered to solicit. Leave it open for just a couple more seconds here. All right, go ahead and close it. And share the results here. So as you can see, it looks like most people, most charities here are registered in about 1 to 5 states, with people knowing that the registration is in 15 plus states for their organizations, closely following. All right. So we will discuss charitable disclosure statements later. I know I just mentioned disclosure statements. I'm sure that's probably not familiar to many people. So I'll discuss that, circle back to that a little bit later in the presentation. But first, I want to dive into charitable registration. Many nonprofits wonder whether charitable registration and reporting requirements apply to their organization, and if so, in what states? Chances are a charity that fundraises must register and report in at least a few states. Why? Because as we just learned, the registration requirements are based on the act of soliciting, regardless of whether or not donations are received in response. Let's discuss regulated solicitation in detail. As we learned earlier, solicitation is simply fundraising, the act of asking for donations, and it can take many forms. The most common traditional solicitation methods are mailing letters, placing phone calls to prospective donors, and holding fundraising events. Some other solicitation methods regulated by states include applying for grants, collecting membership dues, and collecting donations through a charity's website. Today, most organizations have pivoted from in-person events and solicitation methods to virtual and hybrid events. While this allows for greater reach and continued operations, nonprofits should be aware that these activities may trigger additional fundraising registration obligations. Additional methods of solicitation, such as using fundraising counsel or professional fundraisers and partnering in cause marketing campaigns, which are also known as commercial co-ventures or CCVs, also trigger fundraising registration and reporting requirements in many states. For-profit entities and professionals that assist charities with fundraising often need to register with the states as well and follow up with reports. Many charities solicit using several of these fundraising methods, any one of which may trigger state registration requirements. And many organizations solicit in more than just one state, using any combination of methods. To know where your nonprofit is required to register, you must closely examine your organization's solicitation activities in each of the 41 states with requirements. If you're soliciting in any of these states, you may be required to register in one or more states. Now let's talk about another type of fundraising regulated by states that often requires charitable registration obligations. We are frequently asked about compliance for online fundraising. Now, most charities fundraise online. Many charities accept donations on their website using a Donate Now button. Also, nonprofits commonly make solicitations by email, often asking for donations in their email newsletters. Social media is another common form of online solicitation, so are text to donate and text to give. These solicitation methods allow charities to broaden their circle of supporters and solicit residents of every state at the click of a button. This nationwide access to supporters raises questions about how nonprofits who fundraise online must comply with state charitable registration requirements. 8 states have laws governing online fundraising. Most of the remaining regulating states' fundraising laws were written before the advent of the internet. As more nonprofits began to fundraise online, there was an increased need for clarity and consistency from state agencies. So in 2001, to make things more straightforward, the National Association of State Charity Officials, or NASCO, met in Charleston, South Carolina, to develop guidelines for when an organization would need to register. The resulting guidelines are known as the Charleston Principles. The Charleston Principles suggest that if a charity has a donate button on its website, it should be required to register in a given state if it sends targeted emails to the residents of that state or receives ongoing, repeated, or substantial donations from that state. Unfortunately, the Charleston Principles do not define ongoing, repeated, and substantial donations. The Charleston Principles were also not codified into law in all states. So, while they provide a framework for online fundraising compliance, they do not determine where nonprofits must register. Fundraising online is generally considered soliciting nationwide because Donate Now sections on charities' websites, emails to newsletter subscribers, and online asks are all solicitations that can potentially reach prospective donors in every state. When nonprofits receive out-of-state donations from online solicitations and follow up with those out-of-state donors to ask for additional donations, whether by letter, email, phone, or any other method, the nonprofits are furthering their charitable solicitation activities in the state where the donors are located. Many organizations ask us how to handle unsolicited donations and whether receipt of an unsolicited donation triggers registration requirements. While it is possible for a nonprofit to receive an unsolicited gift and never follow up with the donor, the situation is quite unlikely. After all, development staff and volunteers are explicitly charged with engaging with donors and turning them into recurring supporters. Additionally, California requires nonprofits to register within 30 days of receipt of funds, unsolicited or not. Now, there are two practical approaches charities can use to be compliant when they fundraise online. The most comprehensive way for a nonprofit to become compliant is to register or pursue an exemption in all 41 states. For many organizations, charitable registration in all 41 states is the best option because it allows them to fundraise nationwide by any method, including online, while minimizing the various penalties, fines, and losses associated with not being properly registered to fundraise. These organizations invest in fundraising compliance as capacity building. Understandably, though, not all organizations have the ability to obtain charitable registration in all states. Budgetary constraints are a common challenge, particularly for new and very small nonprofits. For these organizations, a second approach might be better. The nonprofit registers in those states where required by its regular activities and is then careful not to undergo solicitation activities in other states that may trigger charitable registration requirements. These organizations should consider placing specific language in their website and on solicitation materials, excluding certain states from those where they can accept donations. Ultimately, organizations must weigh the cost of registering in a state with the opportunity cost of not accepting donations there. We encourage nonprofits to register where they should and not risk trying to evade state charity authorities. Given what you now know about fundraising registration requirements and when they apply, let's take a look at how to determine where your nonprofit may need to register. First, you should determine which states your nonprofit solicits and compare the list against the 41 states regulating fundraising. Your nonprofit will generally need to register or file an exemption from registration in these states. Please keep in mind that state requirements and your specific fundraising activities will change over time. Make sure to repeat this step annually or semi-annually before commencing a capital campaign, major event, or another major fundraising initiative. Now let's discuss exemptions. Typically, state fundraising registration exemptions are based on the type of nonprofit, its solicitation methods, and its revenue. Rules vary from state to state regarding which nonprofits, if any, are exempt from registration. The most common exemption is for small nonprofits with little total annual revenue under $10,000 or $15,000. The number varies by state. Other common exemptions are for specific types of schools, certain hospitals and healthcare institutions, and houses of worship. Not every state offers each of these exemptions. Organizations should carefully check each state's laws where they are fundraising to see if they may be entitled to apply for an exemption. It is essential to understand that most exemptions must be applied for and sometimes renewed. Additionally, should your organization change its mission, programs, structure, revenue, or original criteria for tax exemption, it may quickly need to register in states where it was previously exempt. Becoming compliant in every regulating state requires thorough research of the specific registration and exemption requirements in each state where your nonprofit solicits. A great first step towards compliance is to educate your leadership about state charitable registration requirements and the various fundraising activities that trigger these requirements. Okay, I'm going to take another moment here to launch another poll regarding who currently manages your charitable registrations. I'll leave it open for a couple more seconds, but it looks like for the most part, it's generally an in-house employee that manages your charity's registrations currently. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. That's pretty typical for a lot of organizations. All right. Now, let's discuss why compliance should be a priority for your organization. Likely, your organization will need to register in at least a few states and potentially will need to register in all 41, which is a significant undertaking. While charitable registration requirements have existed for many years, states are becoming stricter when enforcing charitable solicitation regulations. Why? States have done this to protect donors in their state and the reputation of legitimate charities and the nonprofit sector as a whole. Your organization can avoid the risks of noncompliance by taking steps now to become appropriately registered to fundraise in all states requiring registration, even if your nonprofit has been out of compliance in a state for some time. This proactive approach generally avoids penalties, investigations, or further scrutiny from authorities. Here is a quote by the former Pennsylvania director of the Bureau of Charitable Organizations during a speech to a group of nonprofits. Quote, "If you were coming in voluntarily, even if you had been violating the law for 10 or 15 years, you always got a pass. The bottom line is you want to try to register voluntarily." End quote. States want to encourage legitimate nonprofits to register to fundraise as required and maintain their fundraising compliance. States do not wish to chastise charities for trying to do the right thing, even if they are a bit late in registering. In our experience, states are more likely to resolve a missed registration through informal resolutions or settlements than through fines, penalties, or litigation. Charities, of course, must be compliant in every state they fundraise. Organizations that raise funds in every state must generally register in all 41 states with requirements. That may represent a substantial investment of time and effort, but the upside is tremendous. It is a license to fundraise without borders or inhibition. Charitable registration requirements are law. Your nonprofit should treat fundraising registration requirements like federal Form 990 filing requirements and your financial review or audit requirements. Registering for charitable solicitation and renewing those registrations should be included on your nonprofit's list of annual priorities, and registration costs should be budgeted line items. Online state databases of charities reflect fundraising registration statuses, which are accessible to donors, grant makers, sponsors, and other corporate partners at any time. And donors aren't the only ones checking this information. 92% of regulators indicated that they too conduct internet research on nonprofits regularly. For these reasons, your nonprofit will want to ensure it's registered to fundraise where required. And it may also result in revenue increases. No responsible donor wants to give to an organization that doesn't follow the law. Studies show that charities that register and promote their registration status to prospective supporters get a better rate of return on their fundraising requests. That's because supporters gain reassurance from the fact that the organization they're giving to is compliant. Maintaining legal compliance is not only the law, it is a best practice for nonprofits and is a significant area of the Nonprofit Standards for Excellence Code of Ethics and Accountability. Fundraising and licensing compliance are essential to running a lawful and responsible organization and protecting the nonprofit sector's reputation and special status. The first step toward achieving compliance is sharing what you've learned today with your executive leadership and board of directors. Your organization's leadership wants to protect your nonprofit's reputation and future success. We often find that many board members are not fully aware of state fundraising registration requirements, the risks of noncompliance with these requirements, or the benefits of investing in compliance. Now that you understand these details, take the initiative to start the conversation within your organization. Encourage everyone within your organization to educate themselves on the topic and advocate for your organization's prioritization of compliance. Now let's discuss what it takes to register to fundraise and what it costs to register. The specifics in each state are different, of course, but on the whole, you can think of getting registered in 4 phases: research, apply, monitor, and renew. Let's discuss research. It's essential to research your nonprofit's current state fundraising registration status before filing anything. You need to determine whether your organization is not registered with the state, is in compliance, or is in bad standing due to a past registration that was not appropriately maintained. To register, your organization will need to complete an application, pay a state fee, usually based on annually reported revenue from Form 990, and submit supplemental documents, typically your most recent Form 990, your financial statements or audit, formation documents, and your IRS nonprofit determination letter. Some states have corporate registration prerequisites that must be completed before you can register to fundraise. For example, in several states, your organization may have to foreign qualify with the Secretary of State as an out-of-state nonprofit corporation. In a number of states, you may also need to appoint a registered agent. The registered agent must be located within the jurisdiction and is responsible for receiving service of process and other legal documents on behalf of the organization. Understanding and completing these prerequisites before submitting your registration will help you to avoid rejected applications. Once you've researched each state's requirements, it's time to apply. In each state where your organization seeks to register, you must accurately complete an individual application and compile copies of that state's required documents. Registration applications will be required to be filed through an online portal or by email, depending on each state's requirements. While there is an element of convenience to reporting online, it can dramatically increase the time you must spend learning to navigate multiple state websites and enter data into them. Some of you may have heard of the Unified Registration Statement, or the URS. This document was created to streamline the application process in all states. Unfortunately, not all states accept the Unified Registration Statement, and many states require additional supplements to the statement. The URS itself is a longer and more complex than standard state forms, and in our experience, state examiners prefer their state forms and will often take longer to approve the URS. Once your state registration applications are submitted, you must monitor your registration status and confirm their approval. Some states take just a couple of weeks to process registration applications. Others take months. During that time, your organization will monitor the receipt and processing of your state registration applications. Unfortunately, it is not uncommon for registration applications to be rejected by states, requiring their resubmission. When you resubmit applications for correction, you'll need to remain in correspondence until official approval of the resubmitted application is issued. The time from registration application submission to approval may be between a single day and 6 months. Processing times vary from state to state, but through efficient management of the process and the detailed submission of correct and complete applications, your organization can minimize those processing times. Most nonprofits find the fundraising registration process to be complex and time-consuming. For those who haven't yet gone through the process, you should expect to have monthly, even weekly tasks applying and monitoring registrations. Now for the question you're all probably asking, what does it cost to register? As you might suspect, this answer depends on the organization, the annual revenue, and the number of states your organization is registering in. But I can answer this for you today in more general terms. A rough estimate of the range of total annual state fees for registration in all 41 states is between $1,500 to $9,500 for most nonprofits. Now, that's not a per state cost. It is a total of all annual state fees. The total annual state fees to register nationwide for nonprofits with less than $100,000 in gross revenue will fall on the lower end of that range. Nonprofits with more than $10 million in gross revenue per year will pay total state registration fees at the higher end of that range. The remaining nonprofits will fall somewhere in the middle. The charitable registration process does not end with registration approval. States require registrations to be renewed. Most states have annual renewal periods for fundraising applications, although 2 states, DC and Georgia, renew biennially or every other year. Tracking all of your organization's registration renewal dates and ensuring the renewals are filed on time is critical. Most state deadlines are based either on the organization's original registration date or the end of its tax year. Completing your organization's Form 990 and financial statements, which usually must be independently reviewed or audited, depending on the state and the organization's revenue, on time is essential to renewing your state charitable registrations on time. This is important if your organization does not currently get an audit completed each year. Organizations should work with their tax preparers and auditors each year to determine what type of financial statements they need and by what date to remain in good standing with the states. While some states permit extensions of time to file registration renewals, others do not, and late fees can add up. There are also other potential consequences, including damage to reputation or denial of the right to solicit altogether. Like with initial registration, it's critical to adopt a proactive, strategic approach to ensure that your state renewals are submitted on time. Now let's briefly discuss an additional state fundraising requirement, Charitable disclosures. 25 states require nonprofits to include specific language on solicitation materials and donor correspondence. These disclosures are different from those required by the IRS. Organizations will find that they need to comply with both state and federal requirements. State-mandated disclosure statements inform donors where to find more information on a charity's leadership, finances, and activities. State disclosure statements are generally required to be included in all solicitations and donor correspondence to residents of that state, and they typically include on appeal letters, email asks, website donation pages, pledge reminders, and donor receipt letters. State disclosure statement requirements frequently change, and your organization must stay current on each state's current requirements and revise your solicitations and donor correspondence to comply. Although this may be burdensome, regulators often review a nonprofit's website when reviewing their charitable solicitation registrations and renewals. Studies have shown that donors respond more favorably to nonprofit solicitations with disclosure statements. Disclosure statements demonstrate an organization's legitimacy, transparency, and adherence to good governance practices. So make sure to include disclosures because they are required by law and because they boost trust and giving. We've now come to our final webinar topic, how you can manage and simplify the fundraising registration and renewal process. Just as with initial registrations, renewals require the preparation of state applications, determination of the appropriate fees, and compiling all required supporting documents. These documents often include a copy of the organization's Form 990 and financial statements, which may need to be reviewed or audited depending on your organization's size and the states that you register. The most significant difference between initial and renewal fundraising registration filings is that renewal filings have a set renewal deadline for all nonprofits. Tracking each state's deadline is crucial to avoid late fees and penalties. Organizations need an accurate record-keeping and reminder system to track each state's license numbers, fees, and renewal due dates. Many of our clients come to us using some combination of an Excel spreadsheet and a calendar. These systems fail most frequently because they require manual attention, leading to human error and unintentional omissions each time a state's requirements change. Organizations must monitor state law and administrative procedures for relevant changes regularly. At any time, reporting requirements, mandated disclosure language, registration renewals, renewal due dates, and costs may change. With changes in leadership at state registration offices, registration forms, portals, and even acceptable versions of signatures are prone to change. We've discussed the complexities of managing state charitable registration and registration renewals. We've discussed the importance of state charitable registration and why your organization should prioritize fundraising compliance. Every organization's path to compliance is going to be different. Those of you who need to register in multiple states may be concerned by the complexity of the registration and renewal process and the initial and ongoing drain on staff time. We offer a solution. I'd like to take just a few minutes to provide a brief overview of Labyrinth Inc.'s managed compliance services. We take care of all state prerequisites and fully manage each step of the process, from research to application preparation to the compilation of all documents. We cut checks for state fees, send out registration and renewal packages, perform the necessary follow-up with the states, and monitor the approval of each and every application. We take care of any needed extensions and renewals for you as well. We make it as simple as we can for you to get and stay compliant. Our approach to state charitable registration compliance is to provide full service management at a flat rate per state. We bill for services on an annual basis and don't use any hourly billing. If you're interested in learning more, you can schedule a time to speak with us without obligation and get a plan outlining your organization's path to compliance. As a complement to our managed compliance services, we offer software to track state-by-state compliance details for you. The software is for tracking purposes only. It does not automate the preparation of the applications. Our software updates the current status of registrations, state fees, and renewal dates, which assist you in planning and budgeting. The software offers multiple users and varying permission levels, so your leadership, board members, accountants, attorneys, and other consultants can all have visibility. Our new disclosure tool makes it easy to maintain charitable disclosures. The tool provides accurate disclosure statements for your website and printed solicitations. It dynamically updates in real time as there are changes to requirements or registration data. It also creates alerts for any issues with registrations that impact the disclosures. We offer referral and affiliate partnership opportunities. For the accountants and attorneys who are with us today, our nationwide registered agent network allows us to help you wherever your clients are located and enables you to manage both your for-profit and nonprofit clients. We offer industry and occupational licensing across all sectors, including the nonprofit sector. We also routinely partner with firms and organizations to create co-branded educational content that benefits your clients and the industry. You can view our curated collection of educational resources on both the labyrinthinc.com resource page and the Harbor Compliance Information Center. Please contact us for more information on our partnership program. Okay, and then lastly, as I mentioned at the start of the presentation, today's session is eligible for continuing education credit through Earmark. You can use the QR code on your screen now to download the Earmark app, and after the session concludes, we'll email out a 5-question quiz. Once you complete the quiz, you'll receive your CPE certificate. All right, now it's time for some questions and answers. I'm going to begin with some of the most frequently asked questions and some that were submitted during the registration process. These will likely apply to many of you. The first question is, in addition to a state's charitable registration requirements, must organizations also have to complete corporate registration as a foreign out-of-state organization before fundraising? And the answer is yes. Corporate registration, which is also known as foreign qualification, and charitable registration are two different state requirements. Charitable registrations allow a charity to solicit contributions legally in a state and is usually an application process through a charity bureau out of the Attorney General's office with a particular state. And corporate filings, such as those that are filed with a state Secretary of State, instead are required for nonprofits to do business in a state. So to hire employees, buy or lease property or offices in a state, or offer any services or products in a state. The next question is, have any nonprofits been prosecuted for non-registration of solicitation? So generally, state regulators will first send an unregistered nonprofit who is soliciting in their state a cease and desist letter requesting that they stop fundraising and get registered as soon as possible. Charities that do persist in soliciting without registering have been fined, prosecuted, and we have even seen some charities have their right to solicit revoked entirely in a particular state. The next question is there a reprieve for ignorance of state charitable compliance regulations? So, unfortunately, no, but states generally do not impose fines and penalties on nonprofits that come forward proactively and let the state know that they should have been registered and they want to now get caught up and get into good standing in the state. The next question is, if we only fundraise online and through social media, do we need to be registered in every state? And the answer is that generally organizations, as I've outlined in the presentation, organizations that fundraise online and through social media, they must register or seek exemption in each state that regulates fundraising. If you don't want to register in a certain state, then you can put language on your website letting any donors know that you cannot accept donations from constituents in a particular state. The next question is, do you offer help with starting up a 501c3 nonprofit? And the answer is yes, we do offer nonprofit formation services. Please reach out and contact us to schedule a call to learn more. The next question is, does requesting paid corporate sponsorships and partnerships count as solicitations? Does applying for and receiving funds from philanthropic foundations count as solicitations? The answer is yes. Requesting corporate partnerships and applying for funds from philanthropic foundations, they're both considered solicitation of funds for a charitable purpose and are considered regulated solicitation activities that do require state charitable registration. A note there is that grants from state and federal governments are generally excluded from that requirement. The next question is, do nonprofits hosting virtual or hybrid fundraising events need charitable registration in all regulating states? So solicitations at events, whether they're in person, virtual, or hybrid, are still solicitations, and the fundraising nonprofit hosting the event is still subject to the same state rules governing charitable solicitations. So you'll definitely want to do research into the charitable solicitation rules and regulations of the particular state that you're holding an event in before you host the event. The next question is, what are the compliance obligations for foreign nonprofits? So foreign nonprofits can only fundraise in a state through a U.S. nonprofit that is registered to solicit donations in that particular state. So what we typically see is a foreign nonprofit will form a US-based Friends of nonprofit. And that Friends of nonprofit will need to incorporate in a state, seek their IRS tax exemption, and then register to solicit in all of the states where they will be seeking donations. And then the final question here is, can a US nonprofit legally fundraise in foreign countries? And the answer is yes. However, most other countries also require nonprofits to register to fundraise. So you're definitely going to want to do your research and look at the rules and regulations for the particular country that you want to fundraise in. Okay. Thank you for joining me today. I hope I have helped you understand your organization's state charity registration obligations. Please feel free to contact us to learn more about how we can help manage and maintain your particular nonprofit's fundraising requirements. This concludes the webinar for today. I hope everyone has a great day.